Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Gaynor. I'm with Ekklesia. Thank you for joining me for Strategic Management in a Post-Christian Era. There was once a great king, and this king put on some regular clothes, and he left his palace and went down and sat on a little hill outside of town. The people didn't recognize him, but for some reason they were drawn and gathered round him. When he sat down on that little hill, he opened his mouth to speak. And for about 15 or 20 minutes, he addressed some of the most pressing issues on their hearts. The talk that he gave them would transform communities and cultures for thousands of years after he made that speech. This man's name was Jesus of Nazareth, and the talk that he gave was the Sermon on the Mount. What we are going to be doing here is identifying how ancient biblical wisdom has and continues to speak into the modern business world, and how, as we go forward, bringing new products, new services to our community here in Statesville, how we can take hold of some of these fundamental truths to make sure that our community continues to flourish in a way that honors God, in a way where neighbors love one another, in a way where we do business with integrity and maintaining the honor of our names. The business world can get very tricky. We have a lot of different things pulling us one way or the other. This particular class is going to focus on a way that is going to help you to utilize biblical wisdom alongside and integrated with some of the most modern business technology and strategy that's presently available. So, strategic management in a post-Christian era. Over the next 12 sessions, we're going to look at how to analyze a business case policy. That's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at why strategic management. It takes time, it costs money, it takes resources. Why do we even want to go this route, especially if I'm not in a multinational corporation? Maybe I just own a little restaurant or a little coffee shop. This is going to be able to help you, and part of this class is for you to share with us some of the things that you struggle with on a daily basis, some of the problems that you're having to address or perhaps have addressed in the past, that we can all learn from one another and build one another up and equip one another to be more productive here in Statesville. We're going to be looking at internal issues. As you all know, having run businesses yourselves or worked for some organization at some point in time, within an organization it has certain strengths and certain weaknesses. If you know what those are, you are in a position to make wise choices. If it blindsides you, well, you may end up closing your doors. We're going to look in session 4 how external factors impact the business. Whether it's economic factors, whether it's what's going on in Washington, whether it's your suppliers, there are things outside of your control that impact your business. Knowing what they are and being able to identify how to deal with them when something happens that you weren't expecting is something we're going to be looking at. Strategies in action. We're going to be looking at what it means to actually run a strategy through a series of questions to find out, is this thing going to work when the rubber hits the road? Or is it going to fall apart and we're just going to be back to the drawing board? Strategy review and choice. The fact of the matter is that when you look at a business case policy, you're going to be looking at an overview of the entire business. And you're going to see a plethora of opportunities. Praise God that we live in a land of opportunity where there are many different roads that you can go down, but not all of those roads are good roads. And so by looking at different strategies that you can utilize for your business, being able to choose the ones that are going to cost you the least amount of resources for the most amount of reward is going to be something that you're going to have to learn to do rather than just going kind of off the cuff with every thought that comes to your mind. Implementation in the midst of trouble. It's always better to identify the strategies and to do your strategic thinking before you find yourself in a situation, because when a situation occurs and you have to make a strategic choice quickly, you're scrambling for data, you're scrambling for information, and by the time you get something that's something that'll hold water, by the time that happens, your competitors have a one-up on you. Implementation for growth and compliance. When you're implementing strategy, you're going to want to grow your business, whether that's financially, whether it's your impact on social issues within a certain community, regardless of what your growth objectives are as a corporation, as a sole proprietorship, as perhaps a nonprofit, whatever your goals are, you want to focus on, is this strategy going to lead to the kind of growth that we are looking to accomplish? Also, compliance. You have some outside factors. You have government legislation, both locally, on the state level, and nationally, that you have to contend with. So you want to make sure that you are in compliance with those things, and so you have a balance that you have to keep, not to mention ethics. Strategy in the midst of dynamic, progressive revelation. History's moving forward, and the fact of the matter is that if you are in a business, the variables that affect your business are changing on a day-to-day basis, and so while you want to have a fundamental foundation in place with your business, you're going to need to be aware of what's going on in the marketplace, both locally and abroad, because you could be saving money. You could be finding ways to reduce your costs. You could be finding ways to increase your sales. You could be plugging into untapped markets and being able to do things that you perhaps never thought was even possible for a small business like yours. Or perhaps you're a great big visionary and you've got grand ideas, but you have no idea how to actually put the rubber to the road. This is going to help you with that. Ancient wisdom in a postmodern era. As we go through these classes, we are going to be identifying some very specific words of wisdom that are derived from the Holy Scriptures, that is the Christian Bible, and we are going to look at how those impact modern business and why these timeless truths are so incredibly foundational as seeds to take root in our hearts and hopefully through our organizations. Finally, in session 11 and 12, we are going to be doing presentations, and we are going to be basically conversing over the things that you have discovered during the first 10 sessions, having group reviews of the case studies, and really spending some time getting to know the business community here in Statesville, so that, again, we can build one another up, support one another, and continue to see growth here in Statesville. I was watching one of the political conversations recently, and employment is basically been cut in half, which is an amazing thing. I know they're trying to add some additional costs for garbage and not tell us what the costs are specifically for. Politicians seem to always be doing that, but there are things going on in our community, politicians who are trying to do the best they can for us, and we as the church have a responsibility, a God-ordained responsibility, to be the prophetic voice of God speaking into the community. Now, the time that I've been here in Statesville, I've seen some amazing things. They were just wrapping up the building project downtown when I first got here. It looked like a war zone. It looks beautiful now, and that's great. The problem is you still have people on the outskirts of town who are huddled up in little trailer homes smoking crack, and kids on the streets prostituting themselves, and this stuff is going on in the midst of us, and that's a problem. So we definitely need investment to be able to reach into and bless our children who are basically losing a grip on the reality of how God desires for them to have a life that flourishes, to have a life that is abundant. But if we are so wrapped up in our own stuff that we aren't continuously trying to invest in the community, into the darkest areas of the community, where there's drugs, where there's prostitution, where there's these sorts of things, if we aren't speaking into the lives of our children and teaching them how to be wise stewards of the resources that they have given, if we are not bringing jobs here to Statesville that keeps not only a low employment rate, but a quality employment rate, where people who are employed are not having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. We have a significantly low per capita income in this area. But there's tremendous potential if we do what needs to be done, and that includes honoring God in all that we do, particularly in how we interact within the marketplace. So, that being said, Session 1, how to analyze a business case policy. One of the brightest kings to ever live, a man named King Solomon, he says, the first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. So what can we learn from this? If I'm going to be putting together a business case policy, if I'm going to examine my own business or someone else's business and I'm going to offer some suggestions for a strategy change or some adjustments to the way that they're running the business or some recommendations for how they can grow the business, I'm going to want to be able to set forth a case that is ironclad, that has been well thought through. I'm going to want to be able to set forth a case that I can support and a case that I can show them how to actually implement so that they can see it through to fruition. And this is something that you need to be able to do with your business or with your employer. So, we're going to be looking at what is a business policy case. We're going to be looking at guidelines for preparing a case analysis, preparing a case for class discussion, preparing a written case for analysis, making oral presentations, and we're going to look at 50 tips for success in case analysis. I'm not going to give you all 50 of those tips here tonight. I can email you the list. I highly recommend reading through it, thinking it through, and consider implementing those in how you participate in this class and beyond. So, what is a business policy case? Ultimately, it boils down to learning by doing. A business policy case is going to help you to get a bird's eye view of the company, of the organization, and drill down into specific areas, and from those areas and from that overview, be able to make recommendations and apply some of these strategic management concepts. It is formal, it is multifaceted, it is again there to empower you to utilize strategic management techniques that have been proven in the marketplace and are continuously utilized by some of the most productive and efficient organizations in the United States. For the business case policy to be well prepared, again, the idea is to reveal things that perhaps were hidden before. If you tried to make business decisions on a one-off basis, you would end up scatterbrained all over the place. What the business policy case does is it brings it all together in a concise format so that you can make a choice for the strategy that's going to be best for you, or strategies as the case may be. So business policy case, again, in-depth look at a particular organization. Guidelines for preparing a case analysis, you're going to want to think in practical terms. The fact of the matter is you're never going to have all of the variables all at once. When you're looking at a business policy case, you're taking a snapshot of that organization at a given moment in time, and you are making the best possible decisions that you can based on the information that you have at that time. So, that being said, you are going to have to make certain assumptions. Strategists do this all the time. Make sure you're clear about what your assumptions are, and then in gathering the hard data that you actually have available to you, making good, solid recommendations and being able to support those recommendations without flights of fancy. There is a need for justification. The strategy that you present, whether you're presenting it to yourself or a spouse in a small business, whether you're bringing the business plan to perhaps a banker to get a loan for the business, or maybe you're seeking private investors. When you present this information to, or even your managers or leaders, when you're presenting this information, you are going to have to show them why this course of action is the best course of action. Why is it worth them investing their money in it? And that justification is going to come by you doing the research and actually thinking through and asking the hard questions ahead of time, being prepared to answer any rebuttal questions that they may have for you. The fact of the matter is people are competing for those dollars to be able to grow their businesses. And the dollars that are going to be the most efficiently and most effectively used, you want to be the person who has the strategy that's going to be the place where people are going to want to put that seed money. Realistic approaches lead to realized goals. Again, I mentioned earlier, some people are visionaries. They get a vision for a business and they are just full steam ahead. They are big picture thinkers, and once they get excited about something, man, it seems like nothing can stop them. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of it and actually putting pen to paper, it falls apart. And so many businesses fail because they had a great idea, but they didn't think things through down to the very nuts and bolts of it. Not everybody thinks that way. This is why it is so incredibly important to surround yourself with good people who have different skill sets from you, so that you can have people in place that will help you to realize these big picture dreams and visions that you have. By taking realistic approaches, such as diversity of the people investing intellectual capital into your organization or into your strategy, so incredibly important, because they are going to be able to bring you to a level where you can realize your vision as much as possible while still keeping you grounded in the reality of the different variables that are there and working against you. Be specific. If you walk into a bank with a big picture idea and you haven't thought through, how am I going to pay this money back within the next 5 to 7 years? What does that actually look like? The chances are is you're going to walk out there with less than you walked in there with, because you've wasted their time and your time. So when you are talking to decision makers, especially financial decision makers, you're going to want to have the ammo already prepared. You're going to want to be able to know what your ratios are, what your expectations are, some projections, sales projections that are reasonable, so that you can realize your goal. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for setting the bar high. I set the bar high for myself. When I was in business and finance, all my employees knew that I had high expectations of them, but they also knew that I was willing to invest in them and spend that time building them up and developing them so that they can attain to higher levels than they ever thought they could before. This pushed them and it pushed me. Actually, if you asked anyone that worked for me, they would tell you, Justin typically hires people who he expects to do what he does, because that's what I expect. I expect them to learn what I can teach them, take the skills they have, and go do better than I did. Be specific. Originality matters. Again, in this class, you're going to be sharing different strategies, different support for those strategies. You're going to be sharing different implementation approaches. Be creative. If you are creative and you bring something that's exciting, and not only from just the visionary perspective, but also through the entire implementation, if you can connect with people and get them to jump on board with what you're doing because it is original and it is unique, then you're going to have a motivated group of people who are going to be committed to your strategy, and the strategy itself is going to be much more likely to succeed when everyone is on board and excited and motivated. And to maintain that through the whole process is part of what we're called to do. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Be a contributor. 2 things. Listen well. When you're looking at a business case policy and you're collecting information, you should have a genuine concern for all of your stakeholders. You should ask them questions and listen very carefully to what they say. In this class, as we share strategies and as we share implementation, as we share business struggles and how we overcame those and different approaches to different business problems, listen to the other person and what they're saying. But also be a contributor. What you speak into a situation is going to be profoundly more valuable if you have listened closely, perhaps even asked some clarifying questions to make sure you understood what was said, and then by the grace of God speak something that is of value into that situation. Because we are all here to build one another up and to equip one another so that we can accomplish that which is set before us. Preparing a case for class discussion, read the case thoroughly. When you are presented with a business case, there's a lot going on, and so you're going to want to read it thoroughly, think of different things, take lots of notes, ask questions. What, why, who, where, how. Ask these questions and dig into that case policy. Don't just glaze over it. Read it through, think it through. Make appropriate analyses. Don't waste your time investigating a bunch of stuff that's not going to matter. You're going to have to learn to discern what's best to spend your time and resources on, because again, with all the different strategies and all the different opportunities that are available to you, your goal is to identify those strategies that are best. So that's what we want, is we want what is best. Be prepared to offer and defend specific recommendations. Again, having read through the business case policy and considered the company's strengths, its weaknesses, opportunities and threats that are coming at the company or the organization from outside, to be able to make a case for certain recommendations, certain strategies. Why do you want to do what you want to do, and how is it that you want to go about doing it? Case method versus lecture. Case method is a radically different approach to teaching. We're going to be asking a lot of questions in here. We're going to be talking a lot about different things. The lecture part of the class, which is the first hour, it's necessary so that you can gather the information that you need. But then as we engage in the second part of the class, the second hour after the break session, we're going to be spending a lot of time asking questions. So please, during this first session, please take lots of notes and start thinking through what we're talking about, how it impacts you, how it has impacted you, some things maybe that you would have questions on going forward, some insights that maybe you can share from previous experience that you've had. Cross-examination. Again, remember that first proverb. The first person to make his case sounds right. The second person comes and cross-examines him, and things change, right? Everything sounds good when you're hearing one thing, but then someone comes and kind of pokes holes in it, and you think, ooh, maybe that's not the best strategy choice to go with here. That's a good thing, because both the first person and the second person in this scenario is aimed at identifying what is best in each and every given situation that we deal with as we look at different policies, different strategies. Preparing a written case analysis. The executive summary, I'm likely going to ask you to prepare an executive summary that is going to look at a specific area of strategic management. I may ask you to look at the present vision and mission statement of a given organization versus what they're actually doing, and perhaps rethinking that. Might ask you to look at certain strategic objectives that a business currently has and maybe examine that, maybe offer some suggestions or some alternate strategies for that. The executive summary should be typically 3 to 5 pages. You're going to want to make sure, as in all your communications, the 3 C's of communication: clear, concise, and compelling. The comprehensive written analysis is where we're going to really delve into the company. We're going to start by looking at its existing mission, its business objectives. We're going to be looking at its strategies, all the way through the process of examining how the strategies have actually worked, how we might need to rethink those, how we might need to make some adjustments, and we're going to work through that process, all 12 steps of it, so that you can take a comprehensive look at your business or the business that you're interested in starting, or maybe your employer's business, to be able to offer something of tremendous value that perhaps they've not experienced before. Making an oral presentation. They say that the greatest fear that humans have is of public speaking. That may in fact be true, but I can tell you this is something that you can overcome. When you think about why you do what you do, you are business people. You have a tremendous opportunity to impact your community, your employees, your customers, your own livelihood. The Apostle John shares this bit of wisdom. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. When we gather here to discuss our business organizations or our organizations, if our hearts are right, it goes so much further than simply ethics. I'm talking about having a genuine, self-giving concern for the people who work for you, who are entrusted to you, for their personal as well as their professional development, for your customers, to make sure that you are offering products to them that are going to satisfy the needs that they have, that you are going to be concerned that you are going to be a place for them to be able to do business for a long and sustainable period of time. Because the income that you produce as an organization or as an individual is wonderful, but the income that you produce for the people who work for you, who then spend those monies within this community, there is a multiplier effect in that. So your business financial success is directly tied to the business and financial success of the whole community. So if you do what you do well, and if your heart is filled with this kind of love to positively impact your employees, to positively impact this community, which I know that is the case for many of you, then you should have no fear when it comes to presenting your ideas, presenting strategy thoughts, asking questions from your employees and listening to their responses, talking with your customers and finding out what kind of needs they actually have that perhaps are not being met currently. You can share your heart genuinely, and to have a group of business owners together like you who are committed to seeing this community flourish. If we do this thing and we do it properly in the sight of God, well, if we honor God, I believe that He has tendency to have favor towards us. Not that we earn His love. But when I look at men like King Solomon and the good kings of Israel, I see a God who is generous. I see a God who looks and sees people doing the right thing, and I see things happen where there's a flourishing, especially, primarily, when their main concern is not themselves, but rather the kingdom of God, which includes being an expression of His love to everyone in the community. So, what does that have to do with making an oral presentation? Everything. I've heard it said that people don't care what you have to say until they know that you care. Or they don't care what you know until they know that you care. And people who genuinely care have this kind of love in their hearts. So you want to organize the presentation. In organizing the presentation, you want to think through what are the most important ideas that need to be presented. And again, how can you present them clearly, concisely, and in a way that is compelling? Controlling your voice. A lot of time we slip into a monotone thing. You want to be able to make pauses in your communication because nobody likes being read to. If you have a script, nobody wants to sit there and just listen to you to read through a business case policy. Have you ever tried reading the instructions for your stereo or your DVD player? It's not fun. So, controlling your voice, being able to speak. If you're passionate about what you're doing and you're passionate, if you've invested time in your strategy and you've invested time in actually taking
tongues
this
of fire come down,
that, and that's going to be
place upon us the crown, confusion be removed, jagged hearts be smooth. Hear clearly now that every knee should bow. Mashiach's warriors stand tall, evil strongholds fall. We like stones from a brook, a people never forsook. Your sin causing you to grieve, repent and believe. By grace through faith be still. This is God's will.
The implementation is reasonable and realizable. Speaking from notes. Again, I have no problem with speaking from notes. Again, if you're passionate about something, I think what you'll find is you'll be able to speak about the subject pretty intelligently, pretty well versed in it, without much trouble. If you need to refer to your notes, though, by all means do so. Utilize something like a PowerPoint presentation where you have the basic outline or the framework of the conversation, and then work from that. If you need to start out slow utilizing your notes, that's okay. You don't have to feel bad about that. But eventually, we want to get to a place where we can communicate clearly in a way where it's engaging, where you're actually making eye contact with the people so that you're speaking with them rather than speaking at them. Visual aids. Again, I mentioned PowerPoint. You can utilize overhead projector if you want to. There's a flip charts, whatever you need to utilize. You have a plethora of technology available to you. Utilize what you need to be able to get your point across. Don't be overbearing with the technology. Too much can be overwhelming and can actually drown the impact of the presentation. Answering questions. There's a number of different ways that you can answer questions. One of the best ways that I've ever seen is that someone will hand out 3.5 inch by 5 cards to everybody in the room and have them write a question on that during the session, and then that way the reader actually or the speaker has an opportunity to read through the questions and answer them having thought through what was asked. That works well for you as well as it works well for the speaker. If you have questions, sometimes people will maybe say hold the questions till the end of the session. In this particular class, I encourage you to write notes during the lecture part of the evening so that we can really delve into them in open conversation in the second portion of the class. So 50 tips for success in case analysis. Here's just a couple of them to give you an idea of what's on the handout that I can email to you if you want to receive it. View your case analysis and presentation as a product that must have some competitive factor to differentiate it favorably from the case analysis of other students. So we discussed that briefly. Prepare it in advance so you have time to look over it and practice it. Don't procrastinate. Develop a mindset of asking questions. Why? Why is this? Why is that? And in discovering those things, then you can find yourself in saying, well, it doesn't have to be that way. We could actually do it this way, and that would be a little bit better. And this is why I think that is, and this is how I think we should shift gears from this to that. Again, being able to identify those things and present that information clearly, concisely, and in a way that is compelling. The best ideas are lost if not communicated to the reader, so as ideas develop, think of their most appropriate presentation. Again, getting people to connect with the idea. An idea may be the greatest idea ever thought of, but if you don't present it in a way that it can be received, then you're wasting your time and you're wasting the hearer's time. Maintain a positive attitude about the class, working with problems rather than against them. In the business world, we are constantly running into problems. But man, we've got a goal. We've got a vision to attain to. So if we take those problems and refuse to let them beat us down and say, how can this be utilized to my advantage? Actually, at church this month, we have a monthly memory verse, and our monthly memory verse says, He works all things together for good, or to those who love God, He works all things together for good, to those who are called according to His purposes. Your business that you are presently engaged in is a calling. You have an opportunity in your environment to accomplish some amazing things. And if you commit your plans to the Lord, He will establish your steps. And He will work even those things that seem like problems together for your good, to build character, to provide insight for you to be able to offer to future generations. Who knows? He can do some pretty amazing and miraculous things. So 50 tips for success in case analysis. If you want to jot down your email, I'll go ahead and send that to you. We're not going to have any homework this particular week, so that will be, I guess your homework will be looking over that list and thinking through those things, maybe having some questions about that. So, in conclusion today, we looked at 2 specific verses of Scripture concerning business policy cases, and that is, the first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. So again, we're going to be the one presenting cases. We're going to be the one doing examinations in this class as well. So think through what you're presenting. And if you're one who's examining, again, by asking the right questions, you can further equip that other person to be able to do what's best for his or her organization. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. Listen, I want us all to have a wonderful, productive, and a fruitful time as we gather together, because I see tremendous potential and tremendous opportunity here in Statesville to increase our level of average income, our infrastructure, our drawing business here that's actually going to be business that's going to carry Statesville really into the future. Service industry, technology industry, things that go beyond simply manufacturing or some of the services that are already here. Some services also maybe that are more needed for our children. I heard someone talking about their passion about parks and recreation. I know a church down in South Florida that has a place called Ramp 48 where the kids can come and have an indoor skateboard park and indoor rock climbing and these sort of things. And we have some of those things now, but man, I think we can do a much better job here. And because there's opportunities. Great things have been done, but I think that there are greater things that are possibly in the pipeline, that if we all work together with a genuine love and concern for God and for one another, that we can see some amazing, amazing things done. So thank you for joining me in this class this evening. I pray that you have a wonderful evening as you think through some of these things. Please come next week prepared to learn, to get excited about business, about what it means to take hold of this life that is truly life. And so I thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful evening.
Tongues of fire come down, place upon us the crown. Confusion be removed, jagged hearts be smoothed. Hear clearly now that every knee should bow. Mashiach's warriors stand tall, evil strongholds fall. We like stones from a brook, a people never forsook. Your sin causing you to grieve, repent and believe. By grace through faith be still, this is God's will.